people are starting to realize that if we can't find a way to pull carbon out of the atmosphere quickly enough, then solar geoengineering would be the only option in the fight against climate change. This is possibly the first technology that would be truly global in that whoever chose to use it would be affecting everyone else on the planet.
This is not a technology that people want to use. The number one thing we need to do if we are really to address climate change is to reduce emissions. But I think to try to keep it in a lockbox, that's not fair. Solar geoengineering is a global issue and people have the right to understand it and weigh in.
In the UN climate talks in Paris, the world agreed to try to keep warming below 2 Celsius, above the pre-industrial level. But as things stand, we're emitting CO2 so quickly. We're heading towards more than 3 Celsius of warming. And that's if every nation makes every promise that they made in Paris. We know we've got to cut emissions as fast as we possibly can, but just cutting emissions might not be enough.
Solar geoengineering refers to the idea that you could reflect a very small fraction of sunlight back into space to offset some but not all of the impacts of climate change. We know if we reflect sunlight back to space, we will cool global average temperatures. We see this in a lot of natural examples, including when volcanoes erupt.
So the leading idea for doing solar geoengineering is spraying millions of tons of slightly reflective aerosol particles into the upper atmosphere.
We start with laboratory experiments where we try to replicate the stratosphere, but you can never be 100% sure that your lab system, this little tube in a lab, reflects the entire complexity of what you're looking at in the Earth system. So we have to test it in the real world. The goal of SCOPEX is to better understand the impact of putting calcium carbonate into the stratosphere.
SCOPEX is a very small-scale experiment. It would pose no physical harms in terms of its potential impacts on humans or ecosystem. The idea is we would take a stratospheric balloon that would release a very, very small amount of calcium carbonate, less than 2 kilograms. This plume of particles creates an outdoor test tube, if you will. Then, the balloon will turn around and zigzag back through those particles, taking samples, trying to understand how are these particles dispersing, how are they reacting with other particles in the stratosphere. We'll come back down to the ground and the scientists will analyze those results.
There's a risk in doing this research. There is some aspect of giving this idea legitimacy. My concern is that humanity may maneuver itself into a situation where suddenly people decide, well, the only thing left we have to do is geoengineering. I think there needs to be some research to get a better understanding of what the risks are, because this decision will be made whether we have done research on it or not.
One of the most serious potential risks of solar geoengineering is termination shock. If we were to use solar geoengineering to suppress global temperatures, but we didn't do anything about CO2 emissions, and if for some reason you were to stop suddenly all of the solar geoengineering, then those temperatures would suddenly spike back up, and that would mean that human and natural systems had less time to adapt to the new conditions.
Fundamentally, the Earth system is a highly complex system.
The questions become, what does it do to the other climate variables that we care about? That's why we need research. So the question today is not about deployment, it's about research. We could not do research and try to lock solar geoengineering in a box, or we could start doing the research now to better understand the potential benefits and the potential risks.
We have a great responsibility for all those people who haven't contributed to the climate change, but will have to pay for it, including all future generations.
Solar geoengineering would involve deliberately intervening in the entire planet's climate system. Who gets to make that decision? Is this going to be a decision that's based on evidence or based on emotion? How do we make sure that the most climate vulnerable countries of the global south are heard? I hope that we will find our way out of the climate crisis by cutting emissions and through adaptation. solar geoengineering could be really helpful in the fight against climate change. At this stage, we just need to understand